All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, Stephen Tarizin, for dedicating all the Shuman Droshos this month in memory of Reb Steve's father, Albert Zin Bunim Tzi Ben Chaim Zichron Livra, on the occasion of his 20th yahrzeit. Our week of learning sponsors, Kili and Jillian Goldberger, as a schus for a continued refuah for their son Aaron Yeshaya Ben Rivka Esther. And our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Ayala and Sarah Steinberg, and the schus for continued health for Shulamis Chana Bas Susha. In Meretz Hashem Yogdan and the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Slav and Aliyah, the families in Nechama, all those who need a refuah should happen together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Hashem continue to shower brachos and besoros tovos upon Klal Yisrael. But with that, let us begin with a lot to do today. A very, very, very exciting Gemara ahead of us today. So, a couple of Mishnayos, some really fascinating Karbanic details, life details, Hashkafa details, Halacha details, anything and everything you could want out of a daf of Gemara Meretz Hashem we have today. So let us begin. Today's daf is Nun Gimel 53. We are picking up at the Mishnah on Nun Beis Amud Beis 52b, and the Mishnah says as follows: Chatos hatzibor v'hayochid. So we'll say, so now again, remember we're continuing in Parak Ezu Makoman. So literally again, chatas offerings, which a general, chatas is a sin offering. So chatas, ultimately again, individual chatas offerings and communal chatas offerings. So what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, so the Mishnah says, Eluhein chatas hatzibur. What are some examples of communal chatas offerings? Sirei Rosh Chodashim. So these are the goats, right, that are offered up on Rosh Chodesh. V'shalma ados, as well as the chatas offerings that are brought on the Yomim Tovim. If you take a look at Rashi, Rashi says over here, Eluhein chatas tzibur shanu tzrichim lahaskiram shari hapnimios par ha'eda usirei avodos kochavim kvar nishnus. So remember again, just to contrast, we've spoken extensively about communal chatas offerings that are chatas pnimi, offered on the inside of the Beis HaMikdash. So that's again, our par helam davar minat tzibor, par koin Mashiach, seir avodah zara, par of Yom Kippur, seir of Yom Kippur. That we've spoken about extensively. Now, we're transitioning over to communal chatas offerings that are offered up on the exterior Mizbeach. And what are those? Again, so far we have Sirei Rosh Chodashim. So again, the chatas offering that is offered up on Rosh Chodesh, as well as the communal chatas offerings that are offered up on the Yomim Tovim. Good. So we'll say, so what is the halacha? What is the halacha? So the Gemara says, good. So the halacha is shchitas mitzafon v'kibul dam klishar mitzafon. So we'll say, here we go. Back to our Beis HaMikdash. Baruch Hashem, it is so good to be back in the Beis HaMikdash. So remember again, we are talking about all of the karbanos over here are offered up on this exterior mizbeach. When we speak about Safon, when we speak about north, this is north. Right now, again, now the truth is we have to go back. There is a more general discussion about how far north extends. Is this north? Is this north? Or is just this strip over here north? So we're not really delving into that right now all so much. But again, for our purposes, shchita b'tzafon, shchita takes place over here. And the Gemara says, and kibul daman b'klishar tzafon, and Kabbalah in a klisharis is done over here as well. Now, let's remember again, now that statement, Kabbalah in a klisharis, is even more meaningful for us, right? Why? Because what doesn't have Kabbalah in a klisharis? Oath. Right, as we saw yesterday's daf, again, oath does not have Kabbalah and a klisharis. Beautiful, good. So we'll say v'daman ta'un arba matanos al arba kronos. And again, interestingly enough, for what we call a chatas hachitzon, an outer chatas, there is a blood application on the four horns of the mizbeach. What are the four horns of the mizbeach? So again, in this, now remember, this is an aerial image, obviously, and I don't know that you can see the coloration, but if you notice on this image over here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 horns. The horns were rectangular protrusions that were at the corners of the Mizbeach. If you notice on the WhatsApp, we really need to start doing PowerPoint. I need like a big screen PowerPoint that we can go through slides. All right, we're going to get someone working on that. Who this someone is, I have no idea. But we're going to get someone. So we'll say, so if you take a look, I actually put this on the WhatsApp chat yesterday. If you take a quick look, I'm actually now sanctioning use of WhatsApp during Shir. They're like, yeah, I've been doing that anyway for the last 5.5 years. Good. Now Now, actually, and some of you actually were Zaras. You already started already, even before I said anything. So now, if you take a look at the chat yesterday, so I sent you over here. You could see there's two pictures over here. If you even take a look at the second picture, which actually is from the Art Scroll Gemara, from volume 1, the intro of the Art Scroll Gemara. This is also an aerial view, but you can see on that image that there are 4 horns, 4 protruding corners on the Mizbeach. So therefore, again, back to the Mishnah. That's it. We're going to come back. Keep these images up because we're going to come back to them in just a little bit. Demirtz Hashem. Second over here. Okay. So again, so halacha l'maisa says what we have. So communal chatos, ultimately again is shechted on the outer Mizbeach, and halacha l'maisa blood applications on the 4 corners. Damanton arba matanos al arba kranos. Now, both say, now this is very interesting. Ketzad. So now, again, interestingly enough, how are these applications done? Top of Nun Gimel 53a. Now, both say, remember again, these Gemaras are absolutely riveting because right now, essentially, what you can imagine is you're the Kohen, and you're literally again walking through the Beis Hamikdash. So here we go. So how are those blood applications done? So Nun Gimel 53a. Allah b'kevesh. So first thing I will say is, remember, let's just take a look at this image first. Kohen is going up the ramp, right? So remember again, Shechita, Kabbalah is done over here. Then Kohen is going ahead and going up the ramp. When he goes up the ramp, Allah b'kevesh, upana ufana l'sovev. Now both say, if you go back and you reference the image I just sent you in the WhatsApp chat, right? So go back and take a look at that image for just a moment. I'm sorry, I'm going to get more organized in the presentation over here to keep everything somehow in one place. But if you take a look at the image, take a look at the first image that I sent you. So you'll notice something very interesting, which is on the right of the Mizbeach, there is a side ramp. You can't actually, that is not, you can't see it, but just to show you where it would be over here on this image, Kohen would come up the ramp, there'd be a side ramp coming over here. That side ramp would then lead to a ledge. There was a narrow ledge, a 1 amma ledge around the entire perimeter of the Mizbeach. So if you go back to the WhatsApp image for just a moment, so just imagine for a moment, Kohen is going up the major ramp, then takes a detour, a right detour, goes to that smaller ramp, and if you notice, that smaller ramp leads to a small ledge. Now, I will say that ledge was a thin ledge. It was only an amma wide, foot and a half wide, an amma wide, and that small ledge goes around the entire perimeter of the Mizbeach. Okay? So that's, by the way, that's how he's accessing the horns, the chronos. That's how he's putting the blood ultimately again on the horns. Now, I will say, let me just take a step back for just a second because I want to share with you what you're going to begin to notice as we go through this is there's 2 different ways, well, there's more than 2, but there's a couple of different ways that the Kohen would do blood applications on the Mizbeach. Sometimes the Kohen was just standing on the ground, standing on floor level, and doing blood applications on the side of the Mizbeach, above the red line, below the red line. This is unique because for communal chatas offerings, he was walking up the ledge, taking a detour to the right, on the side ledge, going on to what we call the sovev, which was side ramp, I should say, side ramp to a small narrow ledge along the perimeter of the Mizbeach, and doing the blood applications on each of the horns like that. Okay, so go back to the Mishnah now. So Allah b'kevesh, in front of the sovev. So he goes up the ramp, and then he turns right onto the side ramp, right? Side ramp, which takes him to, the sovev, Rabbi say, is the name of the narrow ledge that goes around the Mizbeach, like sovev, like saviv, like around. So that's the name of the narrow ledge that go around the Mizbeach. If you take a look at Rashi for just a moment over here, Rashi says, Allah b'kevesh upon the sovev, mipnei shedama nitan lamala ala kranos ube'etzba tzarech lamod al gav hasovev. So remember again, why does he have to do this? So just understand, since the blood application for a communal chatas was on the horns, right, and again, there was some height to the Mizbeach, we'll talk about the dimensions, he would not be able to essentially reach the horns if he was walking on ground level. So because the blood applications has to be done with his finger, again, this is not the sprinkling, but rather, again, we're going to see he's going to dip his finger, his right index finger in the blood, and literally, again, apply it on the horns. He needed to be elevated. So that's why, again, he's walking on this ledge around the Mizbeach. Around the Mizbeach. So the Gemara says, right, so back to the Gemara. Sorry, back to Mishnah. Oh, actually, finish that Rashi, sorry. v'zorik min hakli lemizbeach u'mikom makom she'yagi lemizbeach kasher. So we're going to see this is as opposed to other blood applications, because other blood applications we don't need it on the horn. Other blood applications, what were we looking for? Above the red line, below the red line. So what would he do? He would just stand on ground level and sprinkle. And I both say there's two things different. Number one, on general blood applications, he's taking it from the kli and he's sprinkling it, right? Sprinkling it. Here we're going to see by the communal chatos, there's an application. He's actually taking it and actually smearing it, applying it on the mizbeach itself. So again, I both say, so far what do we have? Communal chatos offerings offered up on the exterior mizbeach. He's coming up the primary ramp. He then hangs, again, we're just going from the Kohen's perspective. He hangs a right onto a smaller ramp and comes to the sovev, the ledge, which goes around the mizbeach. Okay, that's where we're up to. So exciting. Back to Mishnah. Ubalo lekeren duromis mizrachis. Shabbos said the first corner that he hits is ultimately, again, the southeast corner. So again, just to follow this, coming up over here, this, I know again, and now I can't unsee it since Dr. Gavant mentioned it to me. I was supposed to say just the orientation. This is south. This is north. This is, I don't want to flip it because the truth is, it's the Hebrew on here is actually written this way. And this is the way I've been studying this image for 3 cycles of Daf Yomi. So I'm stuck. I'm sorry. You're stuck. I'm stuck. We're all stuck. But it's okay. We're going to get through this together. So we'll say, so remember again, we've got south, north, east, west. So, right? So the Kohen is on the southern side. He comes up over here. He hangs a right. Remember, we're looking from the Kohen's perspective. He hangs a right onto the smaller ramp. The first corner he comes to, southeast. Southeast. That's the southeast ramp. Good. Next. Southeast corner. Next. Mizrachis tzifonis. Northeast corner. What's the northeast corner of this? So what says, essentially we're going to see he goes counterclockwise around the Mizbeach. Which, by the way, the easy way to remember this is in the Beis HaMikdash, when in doubt, always go right. Always go right. It's good for life. Clearly, New York didn't listen to this. But again, Lamaisa, again, always go right, right? So again, therefore, again, he's coming up. He hangs the right, southeast. We go from southeast then to northeast. Mizrachis Tzifonis. Next, Tzifonis Ma'aravis. Tzifonis Ma'aravis, northwest. What's northwest? That's over here, right? And then lastly, Ma'aravis Duromis, southwest. Southwest, which is going to be over here. So that is the entirety of the blood applications this is for communal chatos. Good, beautiful. So we'll say you have to admit, there's something ridiculously exciting about actually being able to know how the Kohen did the avodah. A lot of times these sugyas are so esoteric to us. But now literally again, if somebody were to ask me to go into the Beis HaMikdash, halavai we should be zocha, and where does the Kohen do? Let's say Kohen doesn't know what to do, mamish, we could show him exactly what to do and how to do it. It's incredible. Shiari hadam, leftover blood, hayashofech al yisod duromis. Leftover blood, Rabbosai, would be poured out at the southern base. Now, this is very important. Rabbosai, where is the southern base? Over here. Over here. That's the southern base. Now, remember again, I just want to point out, up until now, we had, right, when we were speaking about the inner chatos, where does the inner chatos have its blood spilled out? Again, on the western base, which is here. Because remember, again, that's the base that you face right when you come out of the Beis HaMikdash. So we've been speaking about the western base. Now, interestingly enough, the outer chatos has it poured on the southern base, over here. In fact, if you take a look, I think I included this. Did I include this image here in the chat? 1 second. Yeah, so you could see, by the way, you could see, if you notice, on the second image that I sent you, the one from Art Scroll. So if you notice on the right, if you look on the mizbeach, not on the ramp, but on the bottom left, you'll notice again there's a little L protrusion on the bottom over there. That's called the southern base, right? As opposed to the base on the western side, that's the western base. This is called the southern base. Okay, so therefore, again, interestingly enough, outer chatos, the carbon itself, the shiari hadam, the leftover blood, is poured on the southern base. Incredible. The halacha now say into the karbanos from the echanlif melakilayim zichrei kuna. So again, furthermore, consumption. A communal chatos is eaten inside the curtains. Now, I will say, now what are the curtains? Again, I will say, so first of all, by the way, why the southern base? Why the southern base? Because remember, again, the halacha is in general, you'll always pour out shirayim by the first base you encounter when you finish the avoda. So think about it like this. When the Kohen finishes, right, so he's coming up the primary ramp, hangs a right onto the, we'll call it auxiliary ramp, starts over here counterclockwise, goes around the mizbeach, and then he comes down. When he comes off, the first base that he's encountering is actually the southern base. So that's why, again, so again, that's the general halacha. You always pour out shirayim by the first base you're going to encounter. That's Rashi points that out. Rashi points it out. He goes on, he says, the meat of the communal chatos is eaten inside of the curtains. I will say, what curtains were there in the Beis HaMikdash? The answer is there were no curtains in the Beis HaMikdash. Where does the lashon of kilayim come from? That is a lashon ultimately again from the Mishkan. If you take a quick look at Rashi, Rashi says lifnim el kilayim lefish Mishkan hayu kilayim hekef lachatzer o amoid. Remember again the Mishkan, which had certain permanent walls, but also had curtains. Well, not permanent walls, but movable walls. Had curtains which demarcated the various areas. So the lashon ultimately again of lifnei ma'akalayim is a lashon borrowed from the Mishkan, which means you have to eat these karbanos within the precincts of the Beis HaMikdash, which means essentially anything within these walls. This is called lifnei ma'akalayim, which means really they would eat their karbanos in this area over here, or in this area over here called Ezra's Kana or Ezra's Yisrael. That's where they would eat it. But when it says inside of the curtains, it means within the walls of the Beis HaMikdash itself. Good. Who eats it? Who eats it? L'zichrei kuna. It's eaten by the male kohanim. B'chol ma'achol means you could prepare the meat however you want. Why does the Mishnah say this? So Rashi points out, as opposed to Karban Pesach, which has to be roasted, ultimately, again, the meat of a communal chatos can be prepared however you would like it. The Mishnah says, Liyom v'layla ad chatzos. What's the window of consumption? 1 day and 1 night until midnight. Now, again, Rashi points out, interestingly enough, you actually have past midnight. In fact, for Chatos Hatzibor, you actually have until dawn of the next day. But this is actually the first Mishnah Maseches Brachas, where the Mishnah says that any time you have until dawn to do something, what did Chazal do? The rabbis backed it up until midnight. Right? Why? In order to create a protective boundary. So technically speaking, you have until dawn to be able to eat the meat of the communal chatos, but Chazal said really only do it until midnight. Incredible. Say, what a Mishnah. What a Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Hechi Avid, so says the Mishnah ultimately, and I suppose I say now, what we're going to be focusing on a lot for the next little bit is the actual blood application itself on the horns. What does it mean? Where exactly on the horns is that done? So, Heichi Avid, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lazar, Machlokes, Chad Amar Nosin Ama Elech VaAma Elech, V'Chad Amar Machate V'Yored Kineged Chudo Shel Karen. So, as I listen to this, an interesting machlokes over here. Look at Rashi. Ama Elech, Kishu Omid Eitzel Zavis Hamizbeach Nosin Besoch, Ama Shamik Tzwa LeEzer Ruach Shiyertzeh. Oh, Lidaram, oh, Lemizrach. So, listen to this. So the first opinion says like this. I will say, when you talk about putting it on the corner, right? So remember again, now you're saying, where on the corner is that put? So the first opinion says, essentially, as long as you're within 1 amma of the corner, you're good to go. Right? In other words, it doesn't have to be, in other words, when we think about corner literally means like the corner, right? Because remember, again, I will say the lashon over here is ultimately balo lekeren. In other words, the horn, Karen means the horn, Karen also means a corner. So it's interesting. So it's almost like the visualization of this is that I'm putting it like on actually like the corner of the horn, right? Like where the two sides meet. So is that what the halach is? So the first opinion says no. It has to be within proximity to what we'll call the corner of the horn, and as long as you're within an amma of the corner, you're good to go. And right, no sin amma me'elech va'amma me'elech. The Chadam, the other opinion says no. Mechate v'yorid kineged chudo shel keren. No, in fact, you mamish applied the blood ultimately where? On the actual corner itself of the horn. Okay, so machlokes. Salibet Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, da'amar hi atzma inases ela begufa shel keren. The kuli amalo pligi. So let's listen to this. So according to Rabbi Lazar, who says that halacha l'maisa, the blood application itself has to be done on the corner itself. That when we say corner, or I should say horn, has to be done on the horn itself. There's no machlokes. Ki pligi, Keep the Rebbe. Mar Savar Ama Elech Va'ama Elech. So we'll say the machlokes ultimately again is according to Rebbe. Now Rebbe, interestingly enough, we'll say if you look at Rashi, this is in the third line of Rashi. So first of all, before that, we say the Kuli Amalo Pligi, the Lo Ba'inan Chuda de Karen Ksiv Va'ama El Ama Barum Ama. Hanasam Barosham is Beach Bechol Zavis, Vizavis Bechol Makom, Sheba Kari Karen. So we'll say, according to the first opinion, as long as you're getting it on the horn, it's fine. It's fine. It doesn't have to be exactly on the corner of the horn. Where does the machlokes come up? According to it comes up according to Rebbe. Why? Rashi says, this is very interesting. Rebbe understands that essentially, when the Torah says you have to place the blood on the horns, it means on the upper part of the mizbeach, which means as long as that blood is going somewhere above the red line, you're good to go. Which is fascinating. So where does that? So according to Rebbe, that's the machlokes. The Mar Savar Ama Elech Va'ama Elech Kineged Kerenu. One opinion says that ultimately, again, you could. It doesn't have to be exactly on the corner, but it has to be within an amma of the corner. Mar Savar Kineged Chuda in Tfeilo. The other opinion says no. As long as it is somehow corresponding to the horn, even if it's below the horn, as long as it's above the red line. Ultimately, again, it's going to be good. How do they do the blood applications of the communal individual chatos? This is our Mishnah says. So what would happen? Kohen would go up the primary ramp, and then he would take the auxiliary ramp on his right, go to the narrow ledge, he would come to the southeast corner. Now listen, now watch this. This is the Braisa. V'tovel etzba'o hayimanes hamiyumenes shebeyamin min hadam shebemizrak. And what would he do? He would take his right index finger, and he would put it in the blood that was in the bowl. Right, this was the blood in which he did Kabbalah with. He would put his finger in the blood. The Gemara said, "V'chomer begudlo milamala." And this is very interesting. So what he would do is he would take the blood with his index finger, and then he wanted to make sure that the blood was on the tip of his finger. So with his pinky and with his thumb, he would push the blood to the top. Now, you don't have to do that. In other words, it's not a necessary part of the avodah. But the point over here is blood obviously is liquid, so it could run down his finger. He wanted to make sure that the maximum amount of blood was by the corner of his finger. And what would he do? Mechate v'yored kineged chuda shel karen. And he would go ahead and apply it. In other words, he would start at the top of the corner of the horn and extend his finger downward. Mechate v'yored kineged chuda shel karen. Until he would finish, until there was no more blood left on his finger. And this is what he would do with every single corner. So we'll say, so ultimately, again, it sounds like explicitly here that how is the blood being applied? How is it being applied? On the corner, on the horn itself, and on the corner of the horn. Sounds pretty explicit. Which the Gemara says, you're right. Hachi kamar. Mitzvah bichuda. So I'll say the Gemara's conclusion is you're right. Ideally, where should the blood be placed? The blood should be placed on the horn and the corner of the horn. In other words, we'll say the ideal form of the avoda is you take your finger, you start at the top of the corner of the horn and smear downwards. That is the ideal. However, b'diavad, the Gemara says, "I'avid ama elech va'ama elech leslan ba." But as long as you are within an amma of the corner, which is a pretty it's a lot of flexibility. Amma in either direction of the corner, you're good to go. You're good to go. And I will say, that is indeed, by the way, how the Rambam himself paskins. I'll just quote to you. The Rambam says, he says over here, one second, it was halacha zayin. So the Rambam says, וסומך באצבע הגדולה מכאן וגדולה מכאן, ומחטא ויור כנגד חודש של קרן, עד שיכלה כל אדם שבאצבע, וכן הוא עוזבו קרן, במנסן סמוך לקרן כאמה אחס מכאן ומכאן מכיפר. This is how the Rambam paskins halacha l'maisa. Ideally, the blood application again, push the blood to the edge of your finger, start at the top of the corner of the horn, make your way down, but as long as you got it within an amma of the corner itself, you're good to go. Incredible. Okay, so we'll say that is our first tremendous nugget of halacha l'maisa. Let's go back there. Says the Gemara, my Rebbe umay Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon. We'll say now, we've been quoting Rebbe and Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon. What are exactly their respective opinions? This Sanya, here we go. Tamim ha'alyonim. So we'll say nitan michut hasikra ulamayla. So remember, we'll say now we're transitioning back. So remember again, what was unique about chatos, a communal chatos and an individual chatos, is that these blood applications are being done on the horns of the mizbeach. Up until the point in time, we didn't see any blood applications on the horns. All blood applications were being done where? On the side of the mizbeach. And ultimately, again, there was a chut hasikra. There was a picture of that. Yes, so I'll say, by the way, in the image that I sent you, the first set of images, you can literally see again that red line on the side of the mizbeach. You can see that it's there. So I'll say, so again, so up until now, up until today, we've always been talking about the idea of blood applications on the side of the mizbeach, above the red line, below the red line. So the Gemara says, the Sanya. So what's Rabbi Shmuel that we were referencing before? Here we go. The Sanya. Damim ha'alyonim. When blood has to be applied on the top of the mizbeach, nitnin michut hasikra lamalo. They're put above the red line. The Gemara says, v'dam ha'tachtonim. And when it's lower blood, nitnin michut hasikra ulamaton divrei Rabbi. Ultimately, again, they are applied below the red line. Okay. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Vedra, when is this so? Ba'olah sa'of. Only when it comes to a bird offering. But when it comes ultimately again to a chatos, so it comes along Rabbi Lazar Shimon says the only time that we're focusing on above the red line and below the red line is by a bird offering. In general, again, by any animal offering, but let's say chatos, by chatos behema, ultimately, again, the blood applications are done on the corners. Rabbi Avo, my time the Rebbe. What's Rebbe's logic? Tichsiv v'hahar el arba amos or mehar el lemalas. We'll say the Gemara is already quoting the pasuk from Yecheskel. Now, interestingly enough, the har el, the har el, is a reference to the mizbeach. So the Gemara says, Ulamala arba amos hidavi. I understand the mizbeach was 4 amos. The mizbeach was much more than 4 amos. Right? Even the corners were much more than 4 amos. Amrav adabar ava makom kronos arba. The area of the kronos ultimately again was 4 amos. The Gemara says kronos dalit havia el imo roshus kronos dalit. So the Gemara says no. The kronos themselves, even in a way, say the right dimensions are not 4 amos. What does it mean? The area of the kronos ultimately is 4 amos. Shabbos say, if you think about it, means that, remember, as we just said before, halacha l'maisa, where are you supposed to apply the blood on the corners? Where? On the horns, on the corners. But what can you do? You can get an amma on each side. There's 4 sides. That's why it calls it 4 ammas, because you could go up to an amma away from each of the corners and still be yotzei with the blood application. Incredible. Good. Tanan asam. Chut shel sikra. So we'll say, so remember again, let's go back to that red line. Even though again, there's not this sugya, where is the red line applicable? Whereas, at least for now, everyone agrees that it's applicable where? By chatas ha'of, by bird offering. So we'll say, so first of all, the Gemara says, where does this red line come from? Chut shel sikra, chogro be'emtza lahavdil bein dam ha'alyon dam ha'tachtonim. Minahari mili. They both say, it's important to understand, the Torah makes absolutely no reference to any red line. No reference, right? You cannot find a pasuk that says anything about a red line. Gemara says, obviously, we've been talking about it. So obviously, it's part of the mizbeach. Where did this come from? This is very interesting. Amar Rav Acha bar Rav Kadina shenemar b'haisa hareshes ad chatzia mizbeach. Shabbos said, this is very interesting. By the Mishkan, when the Torah speaks about the construction of the altar, of the we'll call it the large animal sacrifice altar, in the courtyard of the Mishkan, so the Mishkan talks about creating a reshes. Reshes literally means like a netting. There was like a copper netting, like you would think when reading the pasuk that it's almost like a decorative type of border that went around the middle of the mizbeach. Shabbos says, so interesting enough. Now, by the way, I want to point out, if you notice, in the Beis Hamikdash, there was no reshes, right? In the Beis Hamikdash, if you look at the images of the Mizbeach that I sent you, you do not have any type of metal border around the Mizbeach. Shabbos say, but what do we do with this border? HaTorah nitna mechitza lahavdil bein damim halyonim l'dam hatachtonim. Shabbos say, interestingly enough, even though that reshes is not replicated in the Beis Hamikdash, we understand why. Why did the Torah mention the reshes? Why? To create a line of demarcation on the Mizbeach. So although in the Beis Hamikdash, ultimately again there was no reshes, But clearly, again, we understand what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted us to do is create a line between the upper Mizbeach and the lower Mizbeach. So in the Beis HaMikdash, that line becomes known as the Chut HaSikra, the red line, which Rabbi say is actually, you can see the image, is actually on the Mizbeach itself. Incredible. All right, so let's go back there. Shir Haidam. So therefore, I will say, again, we're racking up our information as we go along over here. The next piece, remember again, when the Kohen came down, so remember again, so far we've established, he went up the ramp, went right on the auxiliary ramp, took that to the Yisod, the narrow ledge around, did the blood applications counterclockwise. He would then come down. When he would come down, the Mishnah says, he pours out the Shirayim where? By the southern base of the Mizbeach, which is this little zach over here, right? Southern base of the Mizbeach. So I just want to point out also, it's interesting, you can't, I don't know if you can see anything on this image. It's important to understand, the base actually wrapped around a little bit. It did actually go around. You can see that in the image that I sent you. Here, you can see it on the second image that I sent. The art scroll image, you could see that the base wraps a little bit around the southern side. Right, so that's where he would pour out. That's where he poured out ultimately again this shirayim. And I both say even a little bit more on the first image. You could see, by the way, interestingly enough, you could see on the first set of images, the second set on the first set of images, you could see that there's a little bit of a basin over here on the bottom as well, where it says the number 10 over there. All right. Anyway, let's go back there. Says the Gemara. So what would happen? Shari Hadam. He would pour out the remnant, but ultimately on the southern base. So I both say. So again. Just want to point out what we're getting set up for over here. When we were talking about the Chatas HaPanimi, the inner Chatas, right? Which again, Sir of Yom Kippur, Par of Yom Kippur, Par Helam Davar Min HaTzibur, Sir Avodah Zarah. When, remember, he came out with the remnant blood. Where was that poured? Where was that poured? Where? Western base. Western base. Now we're saying outer Chatas is poured on the southern base. So said the Gemara, Tana Al Yisod Mizbach, Ze Yisod Deromi. So we'll say when the Torah says that you pour out the remnant blood of the Chatos onto the base of the Mizbeach, what is that referring to? The southern base. Gemara says, hold up. At Omer Ze Yisod Deromi or Ein El Yisod Ma'aravi. Why? Why not say that the outer Chatos is also poured on the southern base? Right? Sorry, on the western base, right? On this base. And I both say, why would I say that? Listen to this. The Elamed Sasum Mina Mefurash. So Rabbi say, watch how exciting this is. So remember, it is important to understand, all the Torah tells me by the outer Chatos is that you pour the Shirayim, you pour the leftover blood on the base of the Mizbeach. What doesn't it tell me? It doesn't tell me where. Now, that is as opposed to the inner Chatas, Chatas Pnimi, the Torah does tell me which base. Now, again, it's not explicit. Remember, what does the Torah tell me? Right? Torah tells me poured out on the base, El Asher El Pesach Oel Moed. Poured out on the base that you are going to encounter when you exit the Beis HaMikdash. So I'm going to exit the Beis HaMikdash. I'm going to encounter the western base first. So the Gemara says, well, one second. If the Torah doesn't say anything by Chatas Achitzon, does say something by Chatas Pnimi, maybe I should learn out literally again the hidden from the revealed, which means why not just say that all Chatas blood, inside and outside, is poured out on the western base? Because that's the one thing the Torah doesn't tell me anything other than that. To which the Gemara says, Amrit, the Gemara says, no. Yilmad yiridasa min hakevesh letziyasa min haheichal. No, because we'll say we have to equate the exit of off the ramp by the Chatas Achitzon to the exit from the Heichal by the Chatas Pnimi. How so? Because we see a paradigm. What's the paradigm? Where do you pour out the remnant blood? On the part of the base that you encounter first when the avoda is over. So when it's a Chatas Pnimi, an inner Chatas, again, you come out of the Beis HaMikdash, the first base you're going to encounter is the western one. And when you're doing a Chatas Achitzon, an outer Chatas, when you come off the ramp, the first base you're going to encounter is the southern one. That makes the most sense. And that's how the Gemara seems to conclude over here. Now, we're not finished yet. Gemara says, Tanya, let's analyze this a little bit more. Tanya, Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Ze v'ze yisod ma'aravi. Rabbi Shmuel says that both Chatas Pnimi and Chatas Chitzon are both poured out by the southern base, which is pretty incredible. Sorry, western base, excuse me. Western base. Rabbi Shimon Yochai Omer, Zev Zeh Yisod Dromi. Right? So Rashbi says, no, both are by the southern base. So we'll say, I just want to point out over here, the common denominator amongst these two opinions is uniformity of pouring out of Shirayim, right? So in other words, they're disagreeing on the uniformity, but they're both agreeing ultimately, again, that there's one base for all Chatas offerings. So again, Rabbi Shmuel, western base, Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yochai, southern base. So according to the opinion that says that we pour everything out by the western base, that actually makes a lot of sense. Why? Kasavar, Yilmat Sasamin Amafurash. He says, learn out, literally again, the hidden from the revealed. In other words, the Torah tells me that by Chatas Pnimi, everything is poured out by the western base. The Torah doesn't say anything by Chatas Chitzon. So therefore, again, just say everything follows Chatas Pnimi, and therefore poured out by the western base. What would be the logic of saying that everything is poured out by the southern base? What's the logic of that? Amrabasi Kasavar, listen to this, this is actually pretty amazing. Kasavar, Haitana, Kule Mizbeach Bitsafon Kai. Okay, so we'll say, now watch this. Lishnachrina Kule Pesach Bidaram Kai. So we'll say, now, which is saying the same thing. Now we'll say, I want to point out something amazing. In this image, if you notice over here, this is so exciting. This is so exciting. So we'll say, so understand, in this image, which is what we've been operating with until this point in time, the Mizbeach is situated like this, that when you walk out of the Beis HaMikdash, you are hitting the western side of the Mizbeach. There is a fundamental machlokes as to how the Beis HaMikdash, as to how the Mizbeach, thank you, the Mizbeach was actually situated. So as we're going to see over here, there is an opinion that says that the entire Mizbeach was situated in the north, which means, if you can imagine on this image over here, that this Mizbeach was actually much further down. Because remember, again, this is north. North is down over here in this image. The Mizbeach was actually much further down. Now, again, when we say Mizbeach was the north, what it means is like this. This area, what we'll call the square of the Mizbeach, was situated in the north, or better stated, was not situated at all opposite the entranceway of the Heichal, which would then mean that when you would come out of the Heichal, the first area that actually you would hit, that you would see, would be this southern area. Oh, so I will say, so remember again, let's take a step back for just a second. The one piece we know about the pouring out of Shirayim when it comes to Chatas, one piece of information we have is the Torah tells us, pour out the Shirayim where? By the part of the Yisod that is Pesach Oel Moed. So the part of the Mizbeach, the part of the Yisod that is Pesach Oel Moed is fundamentally dependent on the positioning of the Mizbeach. So if the positioning of the Mizbeach is as it's in this image, then okay, then the western side is Pesach Oel Moed. But if you imagine the entire Mizbeach moved here, so that, let's say, imagine for a moment, the ramp starts over here. That means when you leave the Beis HaMikdash, the first area of the Yisod that you are encountering is actually the southern area. That's the machlokes. That's the machlokes. So again, the common denominator over here is both of these opinions are presupposing that there is one area of Shirayim disposal, remnant blood disposal, for all chatas, inner chatas, outer chatas. So in that already stands in contradiction to the previous Gemara. And the machlokes is the positioning of the Mizbeach. If you hold the Mizbeach is over here, then all blood is poured out on the western side. But if you hold that the Mizbeach that was fundamentally down northward, then Allah Almighty, the first area you would encounter is the southern Yisod, the southern base, and that's where be poured out. Incredible. I will say, take a look at on the base. So Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochai. So Rabbi Shmuel, they pass Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochai. Omrim Zev Zeh Yisod Ma'aravi. They say that all of the blood, Chatas Pnimi, Chatas Chitzon, ultimately again is poured out by the southern entrance, V'simanech, and the way to remember this is Machshru Gavri Legavra. Pull one person to the other person. Just put everything ultimately again by the southern entrance. Rashi says Machshru Gavra Legavra. Tamid Rabbi Shmuel Shei Merubin, Machshru Rabbi Shimon Lomar Kedivra Rabbanan. So apparently again Rabbi Shmuel had a larger following. Rabbi Shmuel pulled Rabbi Shimon ultimately again to his side. Rabbi say, how do we paskin? So the Rambam paskin is just as it said in the Mishnah. There are actually two different halachas. For chatas pinimi, for inner chatas, the remnant blood, the shirayim, is poured out on the western side, and for chatas chitzon, for an outer chatas, the remnant blood is poured out on the southern side, over here. Just as it's, and I will say, that is what's stated in the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah itself says, Shiare hadam hayeshofech ayisod deromis. That's how we paskin. So again, in rechatas, blood poured out ultimately again on the southern side, on the western side, and outer rechatas, blood poured out on the southern side. Incredible. Next, Mishnah, Ha'olah, Kodesh Kadashim. So both saying Olah, and Olah is Kodesh Kadashim. Kodesh Kadashim. And both Rashi points out over here, what does it mean when we say that Olah is Kodesh Kadashim? What does that mean? Rashi says, Li pasal b'yotzei b'tvul yom b'chus kippur. And remember again, in general, the higher sanctity something has, the more receptive it is to tumah disqualification. So let's say, for example, kachim kalim, which is lower forms of carbon, are going to be subject to certain things. But kodesh kadashim, Rashi points out, if you're kodesh kadashim, ultimately, again, number one, you're pasul yotze, if you're taken out of your prescribed areas. Tvul yom, if a tvul yom touches it, or if a tvul yom eats it, it's obviously prohibited. And someone missing their kabbalah, like a metzora, or someone like that, or mo, subject to mi'ilah. Good. We don't have to worry about this right now. But again, back to the Mishnah. Ha'olah, an olah is kodesh kadashim, highest order of karbanos. So what's halach by an olah? Remember again, both say an olah is totally burnt on the mizbeach, right? So no part of it is consumed. So what's halacha? Shchitas v'tzafon, v'kibul dama v'klisharis v'tzafon. So first of all, shchitas in the north. You're going to also see a common denominator over here. Almost all shchitas occurring in the north. Shchitas in the north. Kabbalah, reception of blood is in the north as well. The kimol dama klisharis b'tzafon. The dama, here we go. Taon shtei matanos shehein arba. So I'll say again, this really is reminiscent of the beginning of the Masechta. So interestingly enough, as opposed to chatas, which has blood applications ultimately on all four corners, as we're going to see, Ola only has blood application on two corners. But when you did the application on those two corners, is what we call shtayim shehein arba, which is what means what? You sprinkle it on the corner with the understanding of what's going to happen. It actually goes on two sides. So again, I want to point out already, you begin to see the distinctions over chatas. Remember again, I both say, how is the chatas blood applied? Right? It's smeared. Right? There's no sprinkling. Right? The Kohen takes on his in his finger, and again, ideally, top of the corner of the horn and goes down. Here, if you notice by Ola, it's a sprinkling. Right? And again, it's sprinkled towards the corner. So 2 acts of sprinkling, which turn out to 4 blood applications, because when you sprinkle it towards the corner, it goes on 2 sides. Fine. We must have done now you're going to say which 2 corners we're going to have to see. Actually, Rashi already says over here. If you look at Rashi the Shtei Matanos, Bekaren Mizrachis Tzifonis. So the first thing we're going to do is in the northeast corner. So remember, you're going to say, where is the northeast corner? That is over here. That is over here. So north, we're going to see it's northeast corner, and so Mizrachis Tzifonis and Ma'aravis Duromis, southwest corner. So it's actually 2 diagonal corners. So again, we're going to see exactly how this is done as the same thing is coming up the ramp. We'll talk about all this. But again, corner 1, northeast, corner 2, southeast. These are the 2 corners in which, southwest, northeast, southwest. 2 opposite corners. Good. Rashi points out over here, he said, V'achi tam Meseches Tamid, follow the Karen Mizrachis Tzifonis. No saying Mizrachis Tzifonis, Ma'arav is good. So we don't have to read the rest of this. So back to the Mishnah. So Kibul Dam Klisharis Tzafon. V'damun Taon Shtei Matanon Shein Arba. So 2 blood applications, which are really become 4. U'tu'une Hefshit V'nituach V'kalil Kash Li'ishim. And I will say, furthermore, the carbon requires Hefshit. Hefshit means it's flayed, it's skinned. Because as we're going to see, as much as no one eats the meat of the Olah, Kohanim get the hide. They get the hide. No meat, but they get the hide. So therefore, again, the animal is flayed, it's skinned, vinituach, and ultimately is cut up into parts. V'kalil li'ishim, which means it's fully burnt on the mizbeach. Incredible. Says the Gemara. First, the Gemara just asks a simple question. The Gemara says, Ola, my time at Tanale Kache Kadashim. Why does the Mishnah have to say that Ola is Kodesh Kadashim? We know that Ola is Kache Kadashim. Why? In other words, why the need to actually say this? It's very interesting. The Gemara says, "Delo ksivba kodesh kadashim he." Because we'll say, interestingly enough, apparently by other karbanos, Rashi points out over here. Let's say by chatas and asham, the Torah says that it's kodesh kadashim. The Torah makes no such reference when it comes to olah. So there again, you might have thought that because there is no biblically explicit statement that it's kodesh kadashim, you might have thought that Allah lamaisa, it's not kodesh kadashim. Kamash no, the Mishnah wants to just kind of make sure categorically you know where olah lives. Ola is part of Kodesh Kadashim. Beautiful. The Damunton Shtei Matanos. Remember, again, we said that the blood applications of the Ola are two that are four. Two corners, again, northeast corner, southwest corner. So the Gemara says, Heichi Avid. Ultimately, again, so we'll say, how exactly are these blood applications done? So Rav Nassan, I'm sorry, Amar Rav says, Nosein v'chozer v'nosein. So we'll say, if you look at Rashi is in the second of the intermediate wide lines. Nosein v'chozer v'nosein, Zorek minakli, uvayt lemizbeach, beruach zu shal karen, v'chein beruach hashniya shal karen, v'chein the karen shekineg de ba'alachson, nimsa min adam l'dal rucho shal mizbeach, matan l'cho ruach. So we'll say, interestingly enough, Rav says over here that literally, again, there's a blood application, nosein v'chozer v'nosein. Ultimately, again, that literally you're doing it on every corner, right? You do, and you keep doing by every corner. Rashi says, one more, look at Rashi. Sorry, you sprinkle it from the kli, v'lemizbeach beruach zu shal karen, v'chein beruach hashniya shal karen, v'chein l'karen shenegda. So again, according to Rav, what you're doing is like this. So both say, so remember again, you're only going to two corners, right? Northeast, southwest. But you go to two corners of each corner. In other words, you do an explicit blood application on each of the two sides. So just to illustrate this, I come ultimately again to the northeast corner and I do one blood application over here, one blood application over here. So you're literally doing two applications on each corner. That's Rav. Shmuel says, no. Matana achas kimin gema nose. No. You do one blood application towards the corner, and ultimately, again, that one application becomes like the Roman letter gamma. Rashi points out what it's a gamma looks like a chaf, which essentially means this is what we thought in the Mishnah. You sprinkle it towards the corner, and then by definition, I don't want to use the word splatter, because splatter is not a nice word, but it extends over two sides. That's right? So again, just to understand the machlokes over, according to Rav, there's two intentional placements on each corner, right? One on each side of the horn. According to Shmuel, there's one act of sprinkling, and that one act of sprinkling splashes on two sides. Okay, that's the machlokes. So the Gemara says, Ki tanoi, it's machlokes tanoi. The Gemara says, so yachol yizrikenu zrika achos. You might have thought that there's only one zrika, right? One active application, like what Shmuel is saying, and that one active application goes on two sides. Talmud lomar saviv. Therefore, the pasuk says it has to go around. Isaviv yachol yakifenu kichot. If it said saviv, you might have thought that maybe you have to apply it around the corner like a string, like mamish, like maybe like one big application along the whole way. Talmud lomar v'zarko. Therefore, the pasuk says, no, you should sprinkle it. So Hakei said, how do you reconcile this? Hakei said, Kimin gema shtei matanos shehein arba. You go out and you sprinkle it like the letter gamma, like a chaf, which means also, like we said before in the Mishnah, you do one act of sprinkling towards the corner of the horn, which ultimately again extends on two sides. Incredible. Rabbi Shmuel says, Ne'emar kan saviv, v'ne'emar lahalon saviv. So this is very interesting. So Rabbi Shmuel says like this. It says over here is by Ola, because that's our topic. And it says lahalon. Rashi says over here. Now we'll see, interestingly enough, this is by the Chatas Hamiluin. So remember again, this is by the dedication and consecration of the Beis Hamikdash. There are all of these additional karbanos that were brought. So it says Saviv Bain Ola, and it says Saviv ultimately again by the Miluin. Ma lahalon pisuk va'arba matanos. Afkan pisuk ba'arba matanos. So we'll see, if you look at Rashi says over here, Ma lahalon pisuk dalid matanos. Dalid nifsakos zumizu. Rabbi said, actually, we're going to stop over here for today. We'll pick up Emir Hashem with this piece tomorrow. Rabbi said, tremendous. No, is this not absolutely? I see, it looks like a lot of people were intimidated by these sugyas. All right, you'll tell the Chabra, there's nothing to be intimidated about. We got this incredible Gemara. Rabbi saying, and think about this morning when you say Ezu Makoman, as now we go through these Mishnayos, again, we're up to Mishnah only Mishnah number 3 in Ezu Makoman, but how much more incredible, beautiful, and halachic, wholly relevant it has for us. Journey continues tomorrow. Shkeich, everyone. Everyone's going to have a great day. You're pouring out the